Yeah, I pressed.
Oh, you're good. Okay.
Yeah, we're
Three,
we're we're in.
2. What's going on, everybody? We are back again, looking at some more rookies onto the wide receivers. An interesting group for sure. As always, I'm joined by my father, Jeff. How's it going, Dad?
Hey, what's up?
How was
Let's get into it.
yeah,
Wide receivers.
yeah, how was your week of looking at wide receivers? What's your overall takeaway? Not talking about anyone specific, but your overall thoughts. We look at, by
Yeah,
the way, we're looking at 9 receivers today, by the way. Go ahead.
yeah. I don't. I don't know. The first few look okay. Everybody else, I don't know. I guess I'm not super impressed, but
Mhm.
kind of compared to last year's rookie draft, some of these guys are not very big. Of course, they got good speed, but doesn't mean they won't be productive in NFL offenses.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of felt the same way that there's very few, in my opinion, that stand out as like, yeah, this guy could be a top tier receiver in the league, a top 12, top 15 guy consistently. And I felt like a lot of these guys are going to be better NFL players than like fantasy football players, um, just to what they can bring to an offense, and the value they have there. But for fantasy football, we need the guys catching 12 balls and putting up 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. It just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of that in this group. And of course, things can change. Guys get better, with better coaching, and their whole focus now is going to be being a professional football player. So a lot of things can change for sure. But we're going to probably break this up into 2 videos. I said we're going to look at 9 today. We're going to look at the top 4, and then the next 5, and probably the next video. So I think the consensus top 4 everywhere I look is Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Zay Flowers. Those are basically, and everyone, all the big boys, Sports Illustrated, NFL, PFF, whoever. It's those are the top 4. So, and I think the guy I see the most at the top is Quentin Johnson, from TCU. So we're going to talk about him first. So, Dad, what are your thoughts of Quentin Johnson?
Yeah, he's a bigger guy. He's like 6'3", about 210. He's got good speed. I couldn't find a 40 time on him yet, and maybe he hasn't ran it in the combine, or maybe he's waiting for a pro day that's coming up or something like that.
Yeah, he didn't
He
run it. Sorry, he didn't run it at the combine. I don't know if he'll do it at the pro day, but the speculation is that he is in the 4.3s. So but we don't have an official.
Yeah, so I I seen him play a couple times um this year with TCU, and I mean he's an impressive looking body and stuff like that, and his production was kind of okay,
Mhm.
for a supposedly a big time receiver. I think he only caught about 60 some passes, and I know in one of the last bowl games there versus Michigan, he took a pass to the house, long distance, so you could tell the speed there. He's a junior. He kind of had one, I don't want to call it big year, one okay year. So the first 2 years they were okay. So I don't know. I think if somebody's going to drop in a in the draft, and mock drafts and stuff like that, this is my prediction. But again, I'm not a genius or anything like that. But we'll see. Guy gets to the next level again, to the right team, good coaching. maybe he's got a little time to develop. Like, we see a lot of rookies who don't show up until about halfway through their first NFL season, or even into their second year. But again,
Mhm.
he's hopefully he gets the right spot.
Yeah, for sure. I think he is the most athletically gifted receiver in this draft, which is not everything, of course, but it means something. It doesn't mean nothing, you know. So just yeah, his potential and his size, his potential speed, how he tested out at the combine was like, just to put it in perspective a little bit. If he does run in the 4.3s, you know, it's basically saying if it's the high 4.3s, let's say like a 4.37, 4.38, he's going to be like as fast as Devontae Adams. He's going to be built like Mike Williams. I've seen 6'4", I think, as his official height. 6'3", I've seen also listed, but I think 6'4" is the official. So he's as tall as Mike Williams, as fast as Devontae Adams, jump as high as DK Metcalf. So he has the tools, right? And if he does run a 4.3, that would be the 11th player since 2000 to be 6'4" and run in the 4.3s or faster. So there's not guys, you know, Megatron's one of them. Christian Watson was another one. There's also a lot of guys that you've never heard of, because that doesn't mean everything, right? Just because you run fast and you're tall doesn't mean everything. But
Yeah, Randy Moss seemed like he would be in that category, but I don't know exactly.
yeah, but that would be the 90s, right? This is since 2000. So
Yeah.
I think maybe better. I don't know. The Pro Football Reference, that's where they have the cutoff for combine stuff. Maybe that's when they started recording that stuff more seriously. I don't know. But anyways, he has the tools, and I think that's why people love him. And you've seen it. You've seen it to where in games where he can kind of take over, that athleticism, the speed. He breaks a lot of tackles, which I always like to see. You know, he's a hard guy to tackle, which is great. But he his route running isn't always the best. You know, it's a lot of crossing routes or deep routes, which there are players that are successful, like an AJ Brown, for example, does a lot of crossing and slant routes, and he gets it, he can take it to the house. So and DK Metcalf is another guy I think of, like, you can survive with few routes running if your coaches put you in the right situation. It's funny though, he doesn't play, and I've seen this as listed as like a weakness of his as well in a few places. He doesn't play at his size. Like, he can be more physical at the catch, and you know, when it's a contested catch, they want him to be more physical, being 6'4" and, you know, 215. So he doesn't play like you would think a 6'4" guy does. But to me, he's the guy that I look at that could be a top tier fantasy receiver, like one of the few guys in this draft that can be that. And I think he deserves. For me, he's my number one receiver. I don't know about for you, Dad, where you have him in this draft.
I have him a couple of notches down. There's a couple other guys I think I like a little better.
Okay. Well, yeah. So overall, the tools are there. We'll see where he goes. A lot of that's going to depend on where you go. And I think we'll move on to the next guy if you'd like. And I think we'll go to Jordan Addison next. Yeah, well, you want to start with him, Dad? What did you think about Jordan Addison from USC?
Yeah, this guy looks pretty polished receiver. So he played his last year in college at USC. He did the old transfer portal thing, and he was with Pitt a couple of years before that. So his last, not this past year, but the year before that, he was catching a lot of passes from Kenny Pickett. As a matter of fact, he caught 100 passes from Kenny Pickett, and then he transferred to USC this last year. And I think he got hurt, so he didn't play a full season. But this guy looks pretty polished. It's like 6 foot, 5'11". You know, not a great 40 time of 4.5, but
yeah,
he looks the part. You can tell he can go deep. Looks like, I watched some video of him going deep and beating guys, and then he looks like he can run all the routes across the middle and the short and medium passes and things like that. So he's um he's pretty
Mhm.
good, but he's kind of slender. He's about 175 pounds. It- Does that matter? I don't know. We see Devontae Smith kind of in that same category, and that doesn't really matter. That guy seems to get open no problem, but
Yeah,
this guy, yeah,
to,
Addison looks pretty polished.
yeah, to touch on the weight thing, and we kind of mentioned it before about with Bryce Young and just how the NFL is changing, and you can see it in a lot of these guys are very small, like very small guys. Um, uh, and I went back and looked, and I also heard this before about wide receivers listed at or under 200 last year. 8 of the top 10 fantasy receivers last year were at or under 200 pounds, and 13 of the top 20 were at or under 200 pounds. So it just shows you kind of the way the NFL is going. Like Justin Jefferson's under 200 pounds, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, CD Lamb's listed at 200. All these guys, it's not the be all end all, right? Um, for sure. Nothing is. There's no one thing you can look at. Oh, his 40 times good. He's going to be good. It just doesn't work that way. I agree with you though. He's super smooth in his routes, super polished. Doesn't have amazing speed, but you make up for that with your agility and your lateral motion,
Your route
movements, and,
running and
your
things
route
like
running.
that.
Yeah, like Keenan Allen, like Cooper Cup. These guys
You
are
know,
4.5s, 4.6 runners. But they dominate. They can open. And
his
Addison,
his yeah, last year, his 1 year at, well, not his 1 year, but his last year at Pitt with Kenny Pickett, he caught 17 touchdowns and had almost 1,600 yards. That's pretty impressive. And
it's huge production.
yeah, for a college, he would have been a sophomore, at that time. So
Yeah,
this guy's looks the part.
for sure. Um, and we looked at, well, at least I did, and the videos we both looked at together were from USC from last year. But I did hear that his last year in Pitt was the better film to look at. He was just a better receiver then. Um, so something to keep in mind. So yeah, I was just saying, we looked at the USC film, a few games from last year, but I heard that his best film is from Pitt, and I remember seeing him at Pitt. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, I think he goes. The one thing I didn't like, and it's not again the be all end all, but he seems to instantly go down as soon as he's contacted, right? Slight guy, small guy. He doesn't break many tackles, not like a Quentin Johnston. Yeah. And that's basically the weaknesses you see from him listed, or his build and his physicality. And how is he going to be when you have a cornerback playing press coverage? How is he going to handle that? Because it's very different in the NFL. For me, I don't see the path for him to be like a wide receiver 1 on a team. I think he could be like a Devontae Smith, a very good wide receiver 2 on a team. And I think that's where he's best placed. So that's where I kind of lean Quentin Johnston over him. But I don't know what you feel about that, Dad, if you agree with that or disagree.
Yeah, I think he would obviously fit in pretty good to a team that already had a decent wide receiver. And Keenan Allen compliment, but I seen this guy kind of going deep in college, so I know Keenan Allen's not much of a deep threat, but he looks good though.
Yeah. Yeah, he like wins on every level, right? Short, intermediate, deep.
Yes.
He kind of wins on every level, which is good to see. Well, we'll talk about overall rankings, I guess, at the end. We'll move on to the next guy, Jackson Smith and Jigba. from Ohio State. And basically any stat things from 2022 you throw out the window because he hardly played. So this is all based on his 2021 film and stats. And I'll start here. And obviously he's Ohio State. They have a bunch of guys. He was on the team with Garrett Wilson and Olave. Both of those guys went in the first round in 2021. Sorry, 2022 draft. And they were studs in the NFL, right? For stretches and periods of time. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, when you played with those guys in college, he out-targeted them and outproduced them by a crazy amount, which is why people really, really like him. He's obviously different receivers than they are, but I think he had like 1,500 yards. I think he had their yards combined is what he had total yards per route run, which is a pretty important stat. Most of the guys that are finishing top of the NFL in receiving and in fantasy, they're at the top of the yards per route run. He had over 4 yards per route run, which was more than Olave, more than Garrett Wilson. So when you see that and you hear that, it makes you think like, wow, this guy has to be a stud, right? What did you think about Jackson Smith-Njigba, Dad?
Yeah, I again watched him play, and when so this past year he didn't play because he hurt his hamstring basically in the first game of the season, and really didn't do much after that. I didn't know hamstrings were an all year injury, but yeah, like I said, he had a ridiculous Rose Bowl. Not this past one, but the year before that, when Garrett Wilson and Olave had already committed to the NFL and weren't going to play. He had a ridiculous Rose Bowl of maybe like 250 yards or something. CJ Stroud was just throwing him the ball like every play, and they couldn't stop him.
Mm-hmm.
He's pretty smooth operator. Looks like he runs good routes, and he's 6'1", 195. That's not a bad physical dimensions there. We don't have a 40 time, but
it's not overly fast.
No, I don't think he's really fast, but he looks like a slot receiver, but he looks good, I mean, I'd be a little worried about this injury thing and stuff like that. So, but
yeah,
this guy, he's considered one of the better ones,
Yeah. He definitely can play in the slot, but I think he can play on the outside just as well, especially with his size. So yeah, his route running is pretty amazing. It's crazy, like the comparison in terms of athletically between Quentin Johnson and Smith-Njigba. Like Smith-Njigba is not the most gifted athletic, wide receiver, which again, fine. But yeah, his elusiveness is great, and his lateral movements. If you look at some of the combine drills, the 20-yard shuttle and the 3 cone, which is kind of showing you're able to cut and move, cut on a dime type of movements, and those are like above average, way above average, kind of elite level compared to the average wide receiver. So I think he definitely will be a quarterback's best friend. But yeah, only seeing one season of him, maybe a concern. And if he's going to be, in terms of a fantasy producer, if he's going to be consistent, he needs to win on the outside, not just the slot, right? You want those receivers when teams are lining up with only 2 receivers. You want your fantasy receiver to be one of those 2. And then if they have more than 2, you want him to go to the slot, because obviously you can get a lot of easy points when a player's in the slot. But
yeah, let me back up to that Rose Bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of got the stats wrong. He caught 15 passes for 347 yards and 3 touchdowns
Yep,
in one
that's
game.
crazy.
So I mean, and that wasn't really a kind of an accident or something like
No,
that. You can kind of he's that good of a player. So
yeah, and again, just go back to how much he out targeted and outproduced Garrett Wilson and Olave, and like at some point, it's just Garrett Wilson and Olave, I think, are more athletically gifted than he is. But why is he getting the target? There has to be a reason. That's a skill too, right? Is getting target, getting open. So, and to go back to that yards per route run and how important it is, just from the NFL. I know it's NFL, not college, but last year in the NFL, the top 10 receivers in yards per route run: Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle, Monte Adams, Olave, Cooper Cup, St. Brown, Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, obviously all studs. So it's a good stat to look at to kind of predict who's going to do well. Obviously, you need to run enough routes to produce, but yeah, I like Smith and Jigba for sure. But before we get into ranking these top four, we'll get into the last guy we're going to talk about in this video, and that is Zay Flowers from Boston College. Dad, you want to start with him? Or you want me to start?
no, I'll start. I like this guy. He's his measurables aren't bad. He's 5'10". He's a senior. Here's one of these lightweight guys that we've talked about again, around 170, 75 pounds. But he had a pretty productive college career, and he looks like a receiver who can kind of do a lot of things, and he's a little smaller though, but geez, he's pretty quick. Yeah, runs a 4.42 40, so that's pretty good speed.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, he's like a weapon. He's just a weapon, in my opinion. Fast, not the biggest guy, like you said, in terms of his weight, but I really like. I didn't watch a whole lot of him this last season and last couple of years. So when I was watching him, on these films, just I just really like him. He plays. He is 5'10", 175, but he plays bigger than that. He can win over the middle. Obviously, his speed, he can torch you deep. And he's just like someone described it like you can't touch him in a phone booth, right? He's like a cat. Like he gets that ball and he can jump cut and move around, and it's like, how did he get out of there, right? Forcing missed tackles. I really, really like Zay Flowers a lot. And I hope he goes to the right team that can utilize him. If you're going to rely on him to be your number one guy, probably not going to work out. But if has another guy there with him, he can produce like a number one receiver, in my opinion. But he needs someone else there, kind of, I think. So he's not the. We'll have to see. Is he going to be able to win on the outside? I think he has the speed for it, but it remains to be seen. And obviously his catch radius is not the greatest because he's not the biggest guy. So that's always a concern because you kind of need to win contested catches if you want to play on the outside. So having a small catch radius, you need to make up for it somewhere else. I've seen T.Y. Hilton comparisons, and I kind of like that. Very same. T.Y. Hilton was another, 175-pound guy, small guy.
I was thinking more like Sky Moore in a way. I know we haven't seen a lot of Sky Moore, but I don't know. I mean, that's just me throwing it out there, and
that's fair. I mean, they're. I think Sky Moore's a little bit thicker, but yeah, no, that's totally fair. I mean, I can see that he's fast like him, So I don't disagree with that comparison. So when it comes down to ranking these guys, you want me to start with my rankings, or do you want to start?
No, go ahead.
Four. Okay. For me, I have Quentin Johnson number one. I think I already mentioned that. He just has the most potential to be an elite receiver, both NFL wise and fantasy wise. I think he has more potential than all these other guys. So I always go for potential when I'm doing drafts or whatever. I always try to go for potential rather than maybe the safe pick. My next actually is Zay Flowers. I'm putting him number two. I really hope he goes to the Chargers, not to be a homer or anything, but they need that speed. And if he goes to a team like the Chargers, I can see him just blowing up, like having Tyreek Hill like effects on the game and just being able to stretch defenses, take screen passes to the house. And I just hope he goes to the right team. But for me right now, he's number two. This is March 16th. We're over a month away from the draft. We don't know where they are. Smith and Jigba is my third. Like him, think he's really good. We'll see if he can win on the outside consistently, but I can see him easily being the best receiver in this class. I wouldn't be surprised. And then for me, I have Jordan Addison for just because I feel like he is kind of capped at that wide receiver two on a team, which doesn't mean, we've seen multiple wide receiver twos this last year crack into the top 10, 12 fantasy. But I think consistently, he's probably going to be more like a, top 20 guy, in my opinion, good PPR guy. So that's my four. Well, what about you? What are your four?
Yeah, I like Jordan Addison first. I think he's
interesting.
Seems to be, to me, the most complete right now. And then probably Zay Flowers, the next guy, Quentin Johnson. And the only reason I put Jackson Smith-Njigba in that position at number four, it's just, I don't know, injury concerns or something like that. He had one great year in college football.
Mm-hmm.
And, if he stays healthy, I'm sure he'll be a good NFL player, but that's the way I put him right now.
Fair enough. Yeah. Interesting. Or complete opposite on Addison. So,
yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how this all kind of holds, shapes out in the draft, and where they go is really going to make a difference. Not completely, but could make a big difference. So, but yeah, we'll end this video here, and we'll kind of get into the next one, talking about 5 more receivers for the NFL draft. So we'll see you guys